Hi, my name's Natasha and I've been volunteering with Manchester Jazz Festival for the last 4 years. A really fond memory of mine of the festival is listening to the commissioned work by Esther Swift a couple of years ago in the Spiegel tent. A harp quartet is a really rare find in jazz, especially combined with strings and jazz band as well, and I just love that MJF gave the space and the opportunity for that work to be performed. 3 words to describe volunteering with the festival: I'd say vibrant, friendly and surprising, but in a good way. And I just love meeting so many amazing people every year. It really fosters a great sense of community, the festival. And it's just brilliant being able to experience all of that amazing music with such great people every year. All the best for 2020.
Right, hello, I'm Ian, and I have been a very keen supporter of the Jazz Festival for many years, probably ever since it started. Probably most, in fact, all the jazz festivals that have been going, apart from the ones that are interfered with by the IRA. And sadly, this year's due to the pandemic. I would have hoped to have been a volunteer this year as well. I've been a volunteer for the last 2 years, enjoyed it, and I would say the 2 highlights I can think of from being a volunteer are, firstly, picking up the fag ends off Albert Square early in the morning. It's a really exciting job. And secondly, these T-shirts! Yes! Look!
My name's Wes Haydock and I was a volunteer photographer for Manchester Jazz Festival for the last couple of years. The first gig, probably the most memorable, it was Band on the Wall, and it featured Binker and Moses, the saxophonist and drummer, who've made a real name for themselves since. Manchester Jazz Festival is a very innovative festival. It's not afraid to experiment, it's not afraid to bring in new forms of jazz, an extremely enjoyable festival.
Welcome back to the second of this year's MGF Introduces Roundtables. We're talking about some of the fabulous emerging talent across the UK that we've been enjoying over the past years and at MGF. But I thought we'd have a special focus on getting some of the artists that you would have been seeing live at this year's MGF. And we've got 3 of those bands for you today. And the same esteemed panel of expert, inquisitive ears. Let's go around the screen and say hello once more, just to who we've got. Deborah, hello, my dear. Deborah.
Hi, lovely to be here again, Steve. And thanks for yesterday too, I really enjoyed it.
It was great fun, wasn't it? Yeah, more fun than I was expecting. So that's nice, that's good, yeah. And Lucy, we have Lucy Scott.
Hi, nice to be here again. Thanks for having us.
Hi, Lucy, welcome back. Harkrit, welcome back to you.
Hi there, great to be.
So we're here discussing 3 bands. Let's dive straight into the first one. Really exciting kind of power jazz punk trio from Newcastle, Archipelago. And they're going to be playing, I think this is a live set that they recorded. This is a song of theirs called Chemical. Archipelago, wow, great roller coaster ride from three fantastic musicians from Newcastle there. Yes, Christian Alderson on the drums, the amazing John Pope on bass, and Faye McCallum there on tenor sax, also plays clarinet and keyboards and sings in that band as well. Deborah, I'd love to hear your reaction to Archipelago just then.
Well, I mean, channeling the spirit of Pig Bag from back in the 80s. You know, when I first started to hear saxophone in pop music when I was a kid, you know, it was very much that sort of style whereby it's about sort of a type of groove, funk, raucous, honking sort of feel. And I think Faye does that really, really well. She's someone I have seen live and I do know about, and I've played a track by Archipelago on my Worldwide FM show before. And I, you know, what I love, one of the things that I really love in jazz generally, I mean, this is in music, any live music, is that the presence of particular personalities when it really comes across. And I think Faye has got something very strong which you really feel, and I love her sort of attack, and how that is so I mean, that band as a sort of a threesome, you know, all sitting together. I just love their relationship that comes across. The way John just, you know, his sort of clever warmth that he brings through, and the drumming. I don't know the drummer. What was the drummer?
Christian Alderson.
Yeah, great. So you've got this wonderful sort of relationship and personalities that all come across very clearly, I think. If I was gonna sort of say something that I think I'd like to hear more of, there was a moment when I felt like, oh, we need to change, we need to move, and they did. They brought it all down, and actually that was a bit where maybe Faye could have explored something further and different, because I know she's capable of it, and sort of unhooked herself from the repetitive refrain and really start to sort of explore and express more in that particular track, but really strong, and as I say, so much personality, and really enjoy listening to it.
Yeah, and again, I think like we were talking about yesterday, some of the music we listened to, just working with very minimal material as kind of source material, you know. And Harker, I heard you sort of nodding and humming with approval as well during there.
Yeah. Well, Archipelago, probably one of my favourite Northern bands. I've had them up twice, I think. Once with Aaron Ghosh, once with Jay Frisco. I really love them. I think they kind of sit in between like punk and jazz and almost some kind of like dance music kind of influences there sometimes as well. And I just love the way that they're able to explore so much just as a trio. Like they take a simple hook often but explore a lot around that. And this is a really good tune, but then you don't see sometimes like Christian, you might have seen in the video, he has like a whole kind of tray of tricks by him, like different percussion and so on. And, you know, Faye, occasionally she'll sing or play keys. So that even though they are a trio, they're very like willing to explore kind of other sounds within that format as well. Definitely one of my favorite bands.
It's great.
From the north.
And again, it's a band, isn't it? It's
definitely they have a sound that they're going for, and they're kind of exploring around that. But I think it's always like I feel like I can listen to a track by them and think, oh, that's them. You know, real distinct identity.
And I think they've got a really nice live feel about, haven't they, as well? You do always feel like you're in the room with them when you're here, even a kind of non-live recording or something. I think it's got an edge to it, and I think that's great that they kept that on. Lucy, in slightly bigger polka dots than me today, but
out polka dotting you. I really love Archipelago as well. I've saw them again at the Hot House Showcase. And really, Faye was actually exploring writing lyrics and like songwriting on that, and I thought that was a really strong performance there. That punk side and alt rock side that they explore in their music. I find that fusion with the sort of exploration of that in their music really exciting. I love that track. I've never heard it before, but I love the way it starts really starkly, and Faye's got such a power as a front woman for the band. Like, I just think, and even though it's just such a stark like motif, really like builds, and I love that the bit where the drums and bass really pick up and the tempo increases. Like, it's just exciting, and I couldn't help but nod along to that. It's really, really, really good. Yeah, and I'm excited to hear more about it. I see them live at a festival, but I'm looking forward to future when that can happen again.
And they've done, I mean, to their credit, they've done a lot of touring, especially across the north. And I think that's another thing you can see has really sort of propelled them along. You can feel that bandness in their sound, can't you? That you can feel it's gigged in. And yeah, I think I'm choosing that track because actually that's probably the least, the least amount of sounds in an Archipelago track of her, because they do, as you were saying, well, both of you have said, Faye plays keyboards and she sings, and plays clarinet, and John played double bass as well, and Christian's kind of percussion array up widely. But that was, in a way, was kind of the bare essence of Archipelago, just the three instruments, the three voices motoring along there. So capable on a gig of quite a wide palette of sounds, aren't they? Yeah, and
I think the thing about you were saying, and this is a good note for in relation to all the bands we're watching today, because they're at slightly different times in their career. That you can really feel when people are very gig-tastic, where they have been out there, trying it in front of people, because there's something you learn as a musician from that energy exchange between an audience listening and what that drives you to do. I mean, I don't even play an instrument, but I can feel it, when people are playing, they're responding to me moving or whatever. And so there's this exchange. And I think it's an important, for all these musicians to get chances to play, which relates to what we were talking about yesterday, where we've got to support venues as much as we can coming out of lockdown, because this music lives and consumes. It's the food of that gives them the energy to be able to play live, and I love the balls basically people like Faye and John and Christian have to really get out there and put themselves in that risk all the time, because it really shows when you watch something like that.
I think that touring has given them a really nice a following, a connection with a lot of different audiences, and that people will roll up to see them, that perhaps wouldn't go to see an ordinary gig, and they connect really well, I think, to their audience as well. And something else. So, go.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, one of the other things is interesting a band like that is you could put them on a rockier, punkier lineup, like a very non-jazz lineup, and they'd slot right in. And so they've got a kind of accessibility around them. When you say to someone who might not be like a jazz fan, and you kind of show them this, they're like, oh, I wouldn't really thought that was jazz. And that's the kind of reactions that I find really interesting.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? It's this kind of jazz we want to put in lift music, isn't it? Let's kind of scare people out of the lift. But also, I was going to say, what we also saw, always do see in this band, and perhaps more than we saw in yesterday's band, is a wider generational spread within the players as well, and that bringing in that experience. I hope the beautiful John Pope won't mind me saying that there's a few years between Faye and himself, and he brings completely different listening and playing experience to this band, and the way that Faye's kind of come in after studying and is still at a fairly young stage in her individual career, but it all works in a band. Bands aren't that, anyone can be anyone in a band of any kind of background and age, and it works as a band. I think it's a really nice example of that happening without you noticing it here in Archipelago.
That's a really interesting point, actually, which I hadn't really thought about before, because when there was this sort of first UK revival in the 80s around jazz, some of the musicians I remember were playing with people. This is a tradition in the States, particularly, where an artist like Art Blakey or Betty Carter, I remember seeing her live, would bring through young musicians to work with each other. But what's happening in European jazz is that it's not so, it's not taking on the weights maybe of the history of the music so much. It's, as we were talking about earlier, it's really, really like taking, it's more about all the different musics around us and that we're sort of taking in, which are from lots of different eras, because it's all so accessible, it's all at our fingertips all the time. Yeah, there's a lot of bands where you're right, the age range is quite narrow, and that's something that maybe we need to think about going forward, is how to sort of maybe pair different eras together. So for instance, I know Norma Winston does this a bit, because I've seen her perform with Gwilym Sincock, and that was actually at Manchester Jazz Festival, wasn't it, a couple of years ago? I've become a massive Norma Winston fan as a result of that gig. I mean, there's the Peacocks track, A Timeless Place, which I play over and over and over. I absolutely adore her. But I think that's something that's would be interesting as a program, is looking at how to sort of connect musicians from previous generations with some of this younger energy.
Yeah, I think I'm sort of regretting picking John out there, because he's make him sound like Faye's granddad or something. It's only about 2 years. But I just wanted to kind of highlight that the different backgrounds that they come for, slightly different places in their career, and like John has so much kind of experience playing in different types of bands, which you can hear him loving to bits.
It's a compliment to John. It's
absolutely,
a
I know John as well. He's just got like a fantastically eclectic taste.
He's brilliant.
Like if you kind of if you follow him on social media, like the diversity of the music he'll post and or he's enjoying is really, and it really comes across in the way he plays, and that you can see like his band are so different to this. Like, so different. So he's a really talented musician.
And it's great, just kind of bringing all of them coming together. It's one of those lovely examples of the whole being greater than the sum of the parts, isn't it? This Archipelago is another band you can hear live on Sunday, which should be tomorrow, as part of our live streams with United We Stream on the Sunday. 24th of May, that is. And the Archipelago are going to be playing a half-hour live set in the same room at the same time. And that's going out in the afternoon. So do check the timetable for when that's going out. And and we also, I think we debuted their new single, which is another track, their video single, on Thursday night, on the opening night. So you can go back and check some of that. Great, Archipelago. Should we, let's root out our reactions to Archipelago, and maybe we can show our appreciation for them. I'm giving them a thumbs up. Lucy's gone for some crazy applause. So let's move now, another completely different sound world, really. And this is a wonderful young jazz guitar, well, a guitarist, Tara Cunningham. She's from London and just studying, I think, in London. And I came across her last year when I was roaming around at the London Jazz Festival, as we all do, roam around in the hope of discovering new talent. And I stepped to this gig about half accidentally, really, and stayed. And as soon as I heard Tara's playing, I was really brought into her world. She's got a lovely sensitivity and a lovely dynamic range. And I thought I'd invite her up to the festival to play this year. Unfortunately, that can't happen. But we do have one of the tracks from the performance that I was at. So let's have a listen to her band. It's a quintet, but in this piece of music, we just hear 4 of the band playing together. And this is a piece of hers called Home. That was a lovely piece called Home. That's another relevance to our current lockdown situation. Performed there by Tara Cunningham, guitarist, and her quartet. We heard Adam Merrill at the drums, Hugo Piper on the bass, Max Winter on keyboards, and of course Tara herself on guitar, and whose composition that was. Harker, be keen to hear your reaction to that. Is it a new name to you, Tara?
It is, yeah. I've not heard of Tara before, and I didn't make it down to London Jazz Fest last year, so it's nice to see a bit of footage from there. Yeah, I think she's really talented guitar player. It's kind of very dynamic. It kind of lulls you along this journey with them, and I think as a band as well, there was some really interesting like soundscaping stuff going on. And yeah, she's a very like delicate player. I don't know if it was like just that tune or...
Well, I think, yes. I mean, as I was saying before, I was at the gig and the dynamic range across the set was enormous. So that was a very quiet moment in the set, which we listened to there,
Yeah, so I'd be really curious to check out more of her. I'm going to look and see if there's much more of that set online. I think she's really talented and young as well, right?
Yeah, oh gosh, scarily young. This is right. I mean, you put your finger on it there, Harker. Tara is probably the youngest of the artists we've been looking at in these couple of programs, and perhaps by quite a few years. So interesting to get your take on that, Deborah. The sort of where people are at in their careers, and I suppose in any lineup you end up seeing quite a range of experiences, don't you? And range, and Tara is evidently, clearly, at somewhat at the beginning of hopefully a really long and successful career there. But I think we're capturing someone right at the beginning there, aren't we? I'm hearing.
Yeah, and as I said before, having the guts to play live is crucial to this sort of music. So, you know, having being part of a performance like that is really important. When I first heard this, I was like, oh my God, what the hell is that? You know, like noodling, looped medieval. I was like, where am I? I can't get this. And then, but the second listen, I just needed to tune my ear in a little bit to what was going on. And once I'd done that, I found her playing really, really engaging. And what came across to me was this tentative story. It's called Home. So she's making quite a big statement. And there are no rules in music as to how it should really be. And we've had quite a male viewpoint for many years. And for me, what she was doing was actually something that was, you know, a different sort of energy there that I felt has a place. You just need to sort of tune into it. And what she forces is the whole band to come down and to look out for those very, very small moments. There's one part where she does notes, almost like a woodpecker tapping a tree.
Yes, I know what you mean.
Sort of a wooden sound, and I loved that. And I wouldn't have picked up on it if I hadn't have been brought down to this point where I was engaging in all the different moments. And that little sort of melody, that refrain, I think, really won me over eventually. You know, I started to really sort of relax into where we were. You know, as Harker said, a soundscape, and very particular. And then I became really interested in wanting to hear more. And I think that's what, when we are looking at projects that are around emerging artists, that's the best compliment that you can give, is that you want to hear more and see, you know, feel more about what they're going to do next.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're sort of describing what I remember from being at the concert as well, and that sensitivity and amazing, surprising maturity across her compositions and breadth. I mean, unfortunately, we've only heard one of them there, but just her, like you're saying, Deborah, kind of leading a band, and this band of guys, you know, so that in itself is a kind of a really admirable confidence, and it's one we all really want to champion, isn't it? But actually, as you're saying, she's in control of the band, and actually they're kind of fitting around what she's wanting of the music and her pieces as well.
And as I said before, you know, when we were looking at the first band, and we were talking about that sort of blend of an Indian sort of angle onto something. This for me is quite new, because we don't have that many guitarists coming through that play guitar in that particular way. I mean, Shirley Tete is a fabulous sort of name in that area, but there aren't that many really. So that for me is already interesting, because she's playing something different. So that for me is really good.
Great. Lucy, perhaps Tara's a new name for you as well?
Absolutely, I'd never heard of Tara before. Like Deborah said, I got more from it the more I listened to it. The first time I didn't watch the video, and I must admit, I just assumed really wrongly that it was a guy noodling on a guitar. So when I watched the video, I was actually quite pleased to see it was a woman, and she's really, really technically accomplished, really brilliant player. And I've got to say, I love that mellow guitar tone that she's got as well. I really enjoyed that. And again, mentioning soundscapes, like the way it started, I was really intrigued by where it was going to go from there. It was surprising because it didn't go where I thought it was going to go. But my favourite part of it was actually the bit where it kind of resolved after the bass solo, and then Tara's playing came back in, and it felt like the title
to home,
coming home. Exactly. But I thought it was a really beautiful piece of music, and I'm interested to see what she does next. Absolutely.
And everything started the quietest possible dynamic, didn't it? So you had to zone in on that, and you're starting off from the one and you have to go there in order to kind of get the whole feel of what then the dynamic does over the rest of the piece, and be in that. And also, I think, I mean, I'm just kind of noticing this now, but of all the pieces today and from today's programs, I think it's the only piece where, in a way, you've got that more a different approach to like having a more not traditional chord structure with the soloing on top of it and return to a theme at the end. I'm thinking now, actually, out of the 6 pieces, I think this is the only piece that has that structure about it, and perhaps it's great that is still, you know, as valid as it always has been in jazz and jazz history, alongside all of the other formats that we've been hearing in the music as well. So I think definitely one for us all to watch, Tara Cunningham, and let's hope we get her up to Manchester next year in the festival as well to hear a full quintet play that wonderful set that I was lucky enough to experience down at London last year. So now we turn to our final track in the MGF Introduces Round Table with my wonderful guests. We're about to listen to another trio, this time based around Nottingham, Leicestershire area, I think. This is led by a great saxophonist and spoken word artist called Marcus Joseph. And this is his band, Major Ruse. And here they're playing a track, I think it's dedicated to me. It's called Philistine. So. Major Ruse, that was sax player Marcus Joseph there with his trio, Joe Egan on guitar and Jamie Sykes on the drums. Let's go to you, Lucy. Get your thoughts on Major Ruse.
Yeah, so Major Ruse, again, they're a new band to me. I hadn't listened to any of their stuff before. Really enjoyed the sort of the driving like groove behind that piece. It was really, really enjoyable. And I love that live, the sort of energy between the three of them, like, and that's captured in the live video recording, all in a room together playing, like the energy really comes through. Yeah, and I just think that I read a bit about them actually when I was listening, their hip hop influences on their music, and I thought it was quite interesting they mentioned math rock as well, which comes through in like that rhythm interplay and the kind of bossa nova-ish breakdown that they do in the middle. I really, I just thought it was really cool rhythmically. So yeah, and the thing that I was thinking as I was listening was just that the flow of the music was really again, like that groove and flow was really, really magnetic to me.
Yeah, great. Harkrit.
Yeah, I think that moment where they kind of go to that hip hop break, and you're just like, whoa, there's some real energy here. You can really see them vibing off each other. There's great, like Lucy said, there's great chemistry there. Again, I'd not heard of them either, but I'm really curious to check out more of their stuff. And I guess it's like more of what we've been talking about the kind of melting pot of influences. You really see that come through in a band like this, where it's like you could almost piece together all these different genres that they're interested in. You definitely hear a bit of the math rock stuff. And what's great is that, you know, a lot of these bands, and these Major Ruse, really good example of it, even though in a singular tune you can hear all these influences, it doesn't sound disjointed at all. It sounds really coherent and it's got a really good groove flow to it, even though they kind of go so many different places within a really short tune as well. So,
it is, isn't it? Yeah. They say all they need to say in like 4 minutes, and that spirit's really captured. I mean, there's kind of essence of the edginess of the music in its brevity as well. I get what you're saying there. Deborah, perhaps you've come across Major Ruse before, and Marcus.
But in a different context, the spoken word sort of side of what first of all struck me about this piece was I really appreciated the maturity and genuine. It's like they have relaxed into being themselves somehow, and that really comes through, especially I think in the saxophone and guitar. Those, for me, there was something very assured about who they are and what they want to say, and there was nothing, I don't know how to sort of, but it wasn't showy. It felt very real, and I really loved hearing that. And the melody, that sort of appreciation of melody through the sax lines, I just felt that there was someone that to know themselves very well, and that's what they were speaking in what they were playing there, and that breakdown where there's these little gaps, complete stop, that, and then things like that really catch your ear and make you sit up. I also feel this sort of, I've used the word trend before, but I think this, let's say leaning toward keeping tracks of a particular length is really clever. I love a good 10 to 15 minute track. I'm not of going in deep, but I'm also appreciating how bands are understanding that jazz doesn't have to be that as well. It can be the sort of 2-minute pop song as well. And I think that everybody drew their attention to that really nicely as well. I felt it was a lovely little sort of gem of a track, and I totally enjoyed it. And I love the title too. That made me start thinking. And for me, that, as I said, I think the sax work was the opposite to that. It was intelligence. It was cultivated and cultured.
It's interesting. I didn't realize that he had a spoken word background, but just listening to it, it's almost like he's talking through his background. Do you know what I mean? It's like the punctuation with the pauses, and I think yeah, it's interesting that kind of
yeah. And that sort of concise nature of the way they've fitted everything into sort of less is more. It's also reflected in the lineup as well, isn't it? You know, sax, guitar, and drums. And there are quite a few bands now with that similar lineup, and all managing to be different in their own way, which I think Major Ruse is as well. And that's really refreshing. But that kind of stripping back, extending to the lineup and the choice of instruments, you know, the very minimum you need to say what you've got to say, you know, and that kind of and quite often it's the bass player that loses out, isn't it? It's the maybe there aren't enough bass players, or maybe it's that they can all get in one car, can't they? Maybe it's about that. But you know, that kind of the way they're just going back to their essentials in the kind of voicing, the composition itself, and it's like, you know, what is the essence of what we've got to say here, and how can we best say that, you know?
I wonder also whether the location of where a band is based is coming into play here. You know, we've got Archipelago from Newcastle, I think you were saying, you know, and this Major Ruse are based in Nottingham, which is actually a place that I've also lived for a while, a brief while. I think it's interesting because I think there's maybe little sort of movements that go on. I mean, we can definitely look back in the history of music and see that again and again, even recently with the sort of Bristol scene, which continues to blossom with so much interesting music. And I'm wondering, you know, in that last piece and throughout everything we've watched today and yesterday, whether people's location is also feeding through and coming across as a personality. There's definitely a lot of music that I am listening to and working with that's based in Berlin, whereby there is something really interesting going on over there. I mean, partly these things come out of an economical, where can we live that's cheap and be creative? Where can we have studio spaces if we're artists or musicians or whatever? And I feel that there's something interesting through all the bands that we've heard today about maybe where they're currently based.
Yeah, definitely. And that idea of place, you know, being reflected in music making is really, it's an interesting, sometimes it's a contentious one, is it, you know, and I think sometimes, you know, is it important? Do you need to know where someone's from or where they are, you know, and is that important in what you hear in their music? Sometimes completely not. But I think it's also really interesting when it is an important part, and how they choose to do that. And you can hear place in different ways coming through music, can't you?
It's not where you're from, it's where you're at.
Yes, absolutely.
The famous saying goes. But I think in terms of where people study and then they maybe stay in that place afterwards, and there's a flavour that can come through that. So it's not necessarily where we're born. Sometimes it is, but also, or sometimes it's our heritage, our past heritage. But I think actually the place of where you are, you know, where things are placed now, I think that can really influence.
Yeah. Well, I think we're all agreed that Marcus is at it. So I think we should give him our little thumbs up of approval, if that's what we're so inclined to do. I'm going to give him a thumbs up. I might give him a wave, actually, yeah, like that. And you know, in doing this, I've reminded myself that I think we forgot to give Tara a thumbs up, didn't we? We forgot to give her a vote of amazement. Yes, so I'm going to now let's go back just quickly, because poor old Tara didn't get our round of applause, which she's getting from me. Here we go. Yay, good for Tara. There she is. Well, folks, thanks so much for joining me for these sessions. It's been great fun. Really lovely to just get talking about music and hear where you're all coming from and what your take on it. And
it's really nice to actually just enjoy listening to music with other people. Like I've been listening to a lot of music during the lockdown, but just by myself. And so having that group listening experience, even if it is a bit of a shadow of what it is going to a live gig, it's still a really nice thing to be able to chat to people. Oh, what did you think of that?
No, absolutely. It's been great.
I've actually found that sometimes this sort of virtual connection has helped me, because I can think a bit more clearly because I'm not so, you know, like that, glasses falling off. That was a good example. You know, when you're in a live situation, and so I've been able to sort of think things through. But as Harkrit said, you know, I live on my own, and as Harkrit, you were just saying, just this little experience today and yesterday of coming together, listening to something together and talking together has sort of has been a bit of a highlight for me.
Oh, that's great.
Well, I mean, you know, it's a big theme at the moment. It's been a big theme for lots of people at the moment, that sort of thing of what is important about connecting with each other, and how music is so much about each other all the time, you know, being at a gig, feeling that energy together. And I think we'll come out of this very appreciative of that experience.
Absolutely. And I think that was one thing we were trying to do when we decided to do an online festival. How can we bring people together? Because that's largely what people come to festivals to do, you know, to experience music together and be surprised. And, you know, we're all kind of racing around trying to find good and different ways of bringing people together and sharing the music, which we've been doing today. We should say thank you to all of our bands, especially today's bands who've offered their music up for listening. Archipelago, Tara Cunningham and Major Ruse. And we all look forward to seeing them on a stage near you, hopefully over the next month or year, whenever we get back to live music. And it just remains for me to really go around and thank each of our wonderful panelists. I love each and every one of you. It's such a fabulous part of the music scene that I know and love. Deborah Richards, Harkrit Boprai, and Lucy Scott, thank you so much for joining us, and let's do it again sometime.
Let's do it again. Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
And thanks to Manchester Jazz Festival that do so much to sort of bring through this new talent that I find, you know, really innovative and exciting. Yeah, great festival.
Great. Well, thank you, Deborah. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Chris Allen. I've been a volunteer at the Manchester Jazz Festival for the last 4 years, and 2020 would have been my 5th year as a volunteer. My best memory is of in 2017 when the Spiegel tent was up for the first time. Dennis Baptiste and his quartet came to play. I was doing artist liaison that evening, so I met Dennis and his wife when they arrived in their car from London, and offered him a drink and showed him the green room, and we had a great joke about he said, is there anything to eat? And I said, yeah, probably a few biscuits. He said, have you got any chocolate ones? And I said, yeah, only if you're good. And he said, well, okay, I'll have a chocolate biscuit. I'll give it you back at half time if it's no good. Anyway, he came off the stage after the first set, and we had a great laugh because I said, I think you can keep your chocolate biscuit because it was really good, and I'm looking forward to the second half. Anyway, I'm sorry that the Jazz Festival hasn't been able to be on this year, but I'm sure it'll be in future years. Good luck and all the best. Bye.
Well, this afternoon, I am absolutely delighted to be joined by an incredibly distinctive musician, someone who is going to be bringing her band to MJF this year, and indeed was on quite an extensive tour this year, which has obviously now all been curtailed. But I thought I'd have a chat with Bex. This is Bex Birch, who is of Vula Viel, and Bex plays the wonderful instrument that I think you can probably see part of on your screens. Bex, yes, say hello to us, and also give us a little a tinkle on the Jill, is it?
Jill, yeah.
Jill.
Hello, yeah. Well, nice to meet you, Steve. And yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us almost.
Almost, yeah. Next time we'll come back to that. So you've got this, it's probably surrounded by a splendid array of various tuned percussion, but you specialize in this particular instrument, don't you? And I don't know anyone else who does, so I'm sure you can tell us otherwise. But at the moment, those of us who know jazz and jazz-related music and improvisation know you for this instrument. And perhaps tell us a little bit about how it found you and how you kind of came to be such a devoted exponent of the sound it makes.
Oh, it's a long story, and maybe
okay. Well, pick the highlights, pick the really fascinating bits, the weird bits, the funny bits.
I mean, first of all, what's really, really important is to honor where this instrument comes from. It's called the, and it's from the Dagari tribe in Ghana. Also spans the south of Burkina Faso, and it's the Dagari Jill is similar to a balafon, which is a bit of a better known sort of brother or sister to this instrument, although it's very different as well. And yeah, it's a really powerful and incredible oral tradition up there, the Dagari Jill music, and I was very, very, very fortunate to be able to spend some time there and study or just live with one of I think, the most incredible players of this instrument, of this music, Thomas Sakura. And just in the last couple of years of his life, I lived there and was his apprentice in making the instruments. And then after we finished work, we would be playing. And so my sort of schooling in playing was just mainly listening and just really hungry to get inside this powerful music. So there's lots of interesting parts of this story, but there's just so much to talk about in terms of my time in Ghana. But yeah, the main thing is I will always be massively grateful for Thomas and for all he gave me, and the people of Gwo, the village where I lived. Yeah.
So you had that complete immersion. That's really important, isn't it? Because you're surrounded by not just the instrument and the teacher, but the culture that it directly comes from, and so you see it in its context. You understand that.
Yeah, and I was, you say, and you understand that. I don't know.
Yeah. When do we ever fully understand anything?
The interesting thing for me was experiencing a music that wasn't my own, and asking myself, which I'm still doing, still figuring out what is.
And was that part of your appeal as well, that you're kind of finding that something you didn't know?
Yeah, I wonder. I sort of see it as, what I'm asking now is, what is it about that music that resonated with me, actually? A white Yorkshire woman.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, there was a massive part of moving to Ghana, was a part of that, and I was young at the time. I was younger, I guess, early 20s. Well, I was 19 when I first went there, but a big part of that was also running away, and I'm aware of that now. And so, yeah, there was obviously something attractive about it being so other. But as I'm trying to find out who I am as a human and as a composer and a musician, I'm now asking, well, what is it that is what do I need to know about this? What is mine? Not taking from the Dagari tradition at all, but who am I? And
yes,
as we say, like, I've turned out to now specializing on this amazing instrument that wasn't mine by birth. And of course, most instruments, I don't know many people in the UK who are born into an oral tradition where they have an instrument in the same way that Thomas was born with the Jill. And yeah, the Dagari music was my first experience of like an intact oral tradition, which is just a really other thing, actually, from what I knew from my upbringing. So yeah, there's this is why I said it's longer.
Yeah.
There's lots of questions about this and not many answers, and I think it's really important to talk about it and to credit like the things I am figuring out on the journey. And the main one, as I said, is to honor where this comes from and the fact that it's not mine by birth, and yet I was I had an exchange, you know. There was
well, it's so often
music on Thomas's side, and you know, it's been a massive influence on my musical life.
It's so often the case, isn't it? There's one person, and that person has something about them. It might not be anything to do with an instrument, but it just might be a spirit or something in their communication or their connection, your connection with them. So many people have this sort of a way and a story from their past about one person who's appeared in their life that actually opened the door to music generally, and then perhaps more specifically to the world that they currently are working in, you know. And it's so important, that kind of that sort of personality in your life and being open to someone like that, because you now, as you're saying, you're kind of making your own journey onward from that, continuing to discover from it as well.
And then we other people who can do that. That's the amazing thing, right, about music. It doesn't have to be just one. And you know, it's important to start with the story of the Jill, but I was recently playing actually two amazing other elders as well. Like that's the thing for me is Thomas as a musical elder, but also Evelyn Glennie and Peter.
Oh wow, yeah.
Meeting and getting to know recently, who are two elders, in Evelyn in the UK and Peter in New York in the States. And you know, they also exactly what you're saying. I think they put it better, but like opening a door, and then as the youngers, us asking, well, what was it about Evelyn's door that resonated with me? Because it's not that I'm trying to be like Evelyn Glennie or Peter Summer or Thomas Sakura. It's that something that they've done has really like touched something in me, and that's not to take away from them. It's just like it's actually honoring the fact that they are them and I am not.
Yeah, no, exactly. You're exactly right. Yeah, but then what's sort of doubly interesting is perhaps where a lot of the listeners, you know, for a start in this country and the people around you here are hearing you perform in a different context than the one you've kind of brought it from, and the players that you've chosen to share and to make this music with. Perhaps, you know, they're from different backgrounds as well. And obviously, everyone's working in this crazy loose thing we're calling jazz, when no one really knows what it is anyway, and that's part of its beauty. So the way you're putting a stamp on what you've what you've journeyed towards and you've brought back, and now you're thinking, right, how can I make this music my own now, and how can I kind of speak with it? So tell us about how you chose the other musicians at first to kind of be your companions, if you like, to bring this instrument and your story center stage.
That's been a journey as well, and apart from growing up and understanding what's important to me, and as a band leader, I've realized that's a valid question. Is that this has to work for me for it to be sustainable, and so I guess in that way it's a lot about who the people are. I mean, I say that I'm very lucky to have incredibly talented musicians around me, and so in a way, of course, that's first, the music's first, but that's kind of a given in but Jim Hart is an amazing man and a really important friend, and someone who has known me for a lot of years actually, and sometimes understands me better than I can communicate, as you can tell. Communication with words isn't my strong point, and it is with Jim, and he's really good at deciphering who I am, and that's, you know, that's very profound for me. And Ruth Goller is she's I say this in interviews and she hates it, but she's like my hero.
Oh well, for Ruth.
Yeah, but you know, she's an amazing musician, and that came from when I first heard her play, and then getting to know her, and which I'm still doing, still getting to know both of them. The band is very good for, of course.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, she's her kind of understanding of what we were talking about a second ago, about who she is and what her voice is that's a big sort of influence on me, is how well she knows herself. And Jim, of course, and both of them are much more experienced in not just the jazz scene, but in making bands and doing what we're doing than I am, and yet they're both so respectful of of my vision in this, and even in my naivety sometimes in, you know, in trying to figure out what it is I want to do. So as human, you know, as people and as professionals, that makes a massive difference to me, and they're like, yeah, I have to pinch myself with the I get to work with.
And they presumably they've got that wonderful balance of supporting you but pushing you as well, so that, you know, on a gig, you know, you can rely on them and they're there for you, but also you want to be propelled by them, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, that's, yeah, you're right, I've spoken about the supportive, you know, they've each also brought their sound and their interpretation of what it is I'm at and what my vision is, and without that, the band Vula Viel wouldn't sound like it does, that's for sure. It's not like you know, I said, like, Jim really understands me, but he also, of course, he doesn't. We're separate people, and his interpretation of what I'm asking for musically brings something that I wasn't meaning to bring, and then I'm like, oh, and then that's part of the band. It's like, great, that's something I didn't expect. And you know, Ruth's sound is a big part of what Vula Viel sound is. Because as I said, it's so established, and she, like, that's a Ruth Goller sound. That has given, you know, the Vula Viel sort of punk energy. Now that resonates with me, and I have my own sort of I don't know, it's certainly with performing, like, there's definitely like an energy that I bring that works with that, but the sound of the sum of the parts, you know, I couldn't have done without them.
And I think we'll see that energy at play after this interview when we go to look at some of the gig that you recorded a while back. But you've got this, I think everyone watching this is going to be dying to hear this instrument that you have in front of you, just to kind of understand what you know, why you love it so much and what's so beautiful about it. That's nice. So Bex, first, how for start, how big is it? Is there only one size of that instrument, or is this kind of standard? And how many kind of notes have you got there, like, compared to
17 notes?
17, right. And how are those notes spaced? Are they exact semitones, or
they are unexact?
Great.
And it's not semitones.
Great. Okay.
It's roughly G pentatonic, but there's
okay. Yeah. But that adds such a beautiful kind of piquancy, doesn't it, when you're playing with formally tuned instruments as well, so you get that not just the tonal quality and the rhythm and your playing, you get a slightly kind of an edge.
It's one of
that's not
fundamentals that I love. Aspects that's out of our control, and I call it chaos, but
absolutely. Well, I mean, yes, I mean, feel free to show us your chaos now, Bex. how you might, if you were kind of playing for yourself at home, what might you do?
And the instrument, 17 keys, is the Dagari way. Although it's not tuned to the Dagari traditional tuning, is 5 equal to the octave, 5 equal intervals, and this is more like a pentatonic, which is not. And as I said, I made these instruments in Gaul for Thomas, so I get to make my own instrument now.
Wow.
It's an experiment. It's a sort of other aspect of creativity for me, and I'm still figuring out. Like, I've just put this top octave on recently, and just still figuring out.
That's amazing. So you can actually add to your own instrument.
Yeah.
Kind of, extend the expression and the range of it. That's amazing. That's lovely. And it's got what some people might refer to as a kind of percussive rattle underneath, hasn't it? How is that kind of happening?
As I develop my sound on the Jill, as you said, and it is very different from playing an open air Ghana. I get to choose that as well, and it's also under development, but at the moment I'm using I don't know if you can see. Let me show you that underneath these wires.
Oh yeah.
So there's pickups on each key.
Yeah.
And even without the microphone, you'll be able to hear these through my DI, which I have got on the computer as well. And that means I can plug into, I'll show you this as well, some guitar pedals.
Oh wow, okay.
And my Jill goes into that mixer.
Yeah.
Go through. I've got, this is like a freeze. It's called the Super Ego for the pedal geeks out there, and a DD7. And this is the Hoxton Owl, and that's basically a pedal that you can program yourself. And for this one, I have on it what you were talking about, the rattle, I think, is so without it sounds like this, and with it sounds like this.
Oh yeah, so I see. Yeah, so it's quite a treated sound. And that helps you kind of put your own stamp on it as well, obviously.
Yeah, although the buzz is something that I love about the Dagari sound. So traditionally, each of these keys would have a gourd underneath, tuned. So when the key hits its note, the air inside that also sings and amplifies it. And on those gourds, there's holes with spider egg sac on the side, like a kazoo, like a thin bit of paper. When the air does, when the air sings, the spider egg sac vibrates and makes a buzz. Wow. So actually, my partner, but also a very talented electronic whiz, has programmed this for me. She sort of reverse understood what the gourd buzz was doing, and then programmed it into the owl for me. So that one is actually a step to and a nod to the Dagari way. And it's this aspect of, our hands are in control, but there's an aspect of chaos that we're not in control of. So that's the buzz. Too.
It's quite a finely tuned sound. What some other players might, it's the way you kind of worked your sound. Like a trumpet player might kind of spend years, practicing their tone and their embouchure and things like that. And you've kind of brought into that, making a sound, all those kind of effects to make it. It's a kind of strange. It's a natural sound as well. Yeah, it's treated with that kind of electronic, for a naive term, trickery. It's kind of embellishing it, isn't it? And it's actually giving it quite a quirky character as well, which is nice.
Oh well, thank you. Yeah, it's all, especially in this time. I'm playing a lot solo. I'm writing a lot of solo, Jill, and I'm actually, understanding my sound and what I want from it even more. And it's, it's going to be I think it's going to be a lifetime sort of journey of that.
Absolutely, yeah. Could we perhaps invite you to play something solo that you might be in the middle of working on, something now, so we can hear some of some of the things you've been talking about in practice?
Okay. Something I've been working on, gosh.
Or anything really. So you're using 4 mallets, are you, as well? Because that's right. Okay. Yeah.
I haven't. I haven't been doing it on gigs in Vula Viel, but my solo work, I've been doing some sort of 4-mallet stuff. What should I play to you though?
Anything that you feel like at the moment, Bex. Look out the window and be inspired.
Actually, that's good advice. I've got a good view.
Oh, thank you so much, Bex. This is such a treat. This is feels like it's just for me. But what struck me as well, which we kind of didn't mention before, is actually the physicality that you put into playing as well, because I think you're sitting down there. You probably stand up on gigs as well sometimes, don't you, to really get into it? But it's quite a, I don't know how long it is. It about, I don't know, kind of 4 feet long or something like that. So you're kind of moving around it, aren't you, as well? You're dancing with it.
Yeah, I always I never try and do that.
It just happens.
I think for me, like and actually playing at home has really taught me again, like what it is about my movement that is from me, rather than sometimes you feel like you want to give it to an audience, but actually I really like that it can come from the music and the excitement from that. And me as a player, I think kind of I was always sort of quite a jumpy person, and even sitting down. But yeah, I used to play the drum kit, and people used to say that it looked funny because I sort of bounce around playing the drum. So yeah, I think that is part of me and how I get into music. Not always. Well, yeah, I mean maybe always.
Yeah. And you also, how does improvisation come into this as well? Because you've obviously got you played something then which may have been partly composed or and when you're writing new tunes for the band and when you're on the gigs, how does that kind of improvisation come into each of the pieces? Do you make lots of room for it, or are you quite specific about where and when it happens?
Yeah, it's changing. And it depends on the tune. That was improvised, I guess.
Oh wow, okay.
And, I sort of had options in my head, I guess, and I had this motif. But and I'm enjoying sort of what that depth of listening, that even improvising on my own, where that takes me, and with the band, with Ruth and Jim, I love that as well. I think the first Vula Viel album, which was with a different lineup, with a sextet on the album, was all none of it was my material. It was all music Thomas had taught me, and it was also kind of set. It was the Dagari traditional stuff that had been going around my head, and at that time I needed to get it down and put it on to sort of work through it myself. And we had some spaces for solos, but I was very new to the jazz world, and it was very much led by like George Crowley and took lots of solos, and Dan Nichols
as well, yeah.
And Dave DeRose and Simon Roth. And Jim actually was on that first album on Vibes. So the second album, Do Not Be Afraid, with Ruth and Jim, was the first one where it was kind of my material, my like words. Even we got some lyrics and meanings and melodies, and it's still very much used the Dagari forms, like equivalent of 12 bar blues, and then sorry, I'm going on a bit, but anyway, the next album is another kind of half step in terms of relying less on even the Dagari forms, although I don't think I'll ever be finished with some of the amazing sort of rhythmic treatments that I learned there. And sort of gradually also understanding myself as an improviser rather than just someone who's in a band with improvisers. And
absolutely.
then it becomes more part of the band rather than, okay, let's do a verse, a chorus, and then Ruth has a solo, which it was at the start of the trio. More just free generally, and and of course Ruth and Jim have loads of input on that, but it's also sometimes I put like limitations on what, like kind of rules on what they can be rather than the same old licks.
Yeah.
Okay, well yeah, this is a solo, but Jim kind of laughs at me, but I'm like, okay, this is a solo, Jim, but you can't play any metal. There's no solo.
That's a good instruction. And it's very, I mean, that also is what an audience loves as well, kind of seeing that combination, the energy that you bring as individuals and collectively, and obviously the sound of that instrument, but the three of you together, that kind of spirit that you were talking about earlier, coming live into a room. I think your gigs, and we'll shortly go and have a look at this in practice. But there's an energy in the room, isn't there? And I think the audience feels that, and they connect very immediately with what you're doing, and not just the sounds of the instruments, but that kind of where you're bringing it from and where you're taking it to, and the relationship you have with the players as well. Yeah. We'll have a look at that concert very soon, Bex, but I wonder we should wind up our little chat, and I wonder if you'd be good enough to just play us out with a short, either a composed or an improvised piece, sure, to the delight of our ears. And before you do that, I should say thank you so much to Bex Birch, and let's hope we can see Vula Viel on the road very, very soon, and fingers crossed back in Manchester next year. But
good luck with everything as well.
Thank you.
And yeah, it is. It's, you were saying, like, audiences are moved, and we never know, and we just have to go and do our thing. And the amazing thing about music is that it's bigger than any of the stuff we've been talking about.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't matter where it's coming from for us either. It's an audience, you hear it as you hear it, and it means what it means to you, and that's the wonderful thing. It's not really about us. I love that. Having said that, oh yeah, this is a tune that I didn't write. Thomas Sakura, or a traditional Dagari tune called Yaya Kolo. Okay, should I play? Yeah. Thank you. You're all very welcome. I realise that as I grow up and old, there's a little bit of ring on here, Sean.
You're not old.
That even not fitting in, I am comfortable in my own skin. Even not fitting in here, I am comfortable in my own skin. Even not fitting in, hey, I am comfortable in my own skin. Even not fitting in, hey, I am comfortable in my own skin. Even not fitting in, hey, anyone heard a bird in Kumasi?
Right, hello, I'm Ian, and I have been a very keen supporter of the Jazz Festival for many years, probably ever since it started. I've probably been to most, in fact all the jazz festivals that have been going, apart from the ones that are interfered with by the IRA. And sadly, this year's, due to the pandemic, I would have hoped to have been a volunteer this year as well. I've been a volunteer for the last 2 years, enjoyed it, and I would say The two ways I can think of being a volunteer are, firstly, picking up the fag ends off Albert Square early in the morning. It's a really exciting job. And secondly, these T-shirts! Yes! Look!
Hi, my name's Natasha and I've been volunteering with Manchester Jazz Festival for the last 4 years. A really fond memory of mine of the festival is listening to the commissioned work by Esther Swift a couple of years ago in the Spiegel tent. A harp quartet is a really rare find in jazz, especially combined with strings and jazz band as well, and I just love that MJF gave the space and the opportunity for that work to be performed. 3 words to describe volunteering with the festival: I'd say vibrant, friendly and surprising, but in a good way. And I just love meeting so many amazing people every year. It really fosters a great sense of community, the festival. And it's just brilliant being able to experience all of that amazing music with such great people every year. All the best for 2020.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the second of this year's MGF Introduces Round Tables.
My name's Wes Haydock and I was a volunteer photographer for Manchester Jazz Festival for the last couple of years. The first gig I did was probably the most memorable. It was Band on the Wall, and it featured Binker and Moses, the saxophonist and drummer, who've made a real name for themselves since. Manchester Jazz Festival is a very innovative festival. It's not afraid to experiment, it's not afraid to bring in new forms of jazz. It's an extremely enjoyable festival.
Hi, my name's Natasha and I've been volunteering with Manchester Jazz Festival for the last 4 years. A really fond memory of mine of the festival is listening to the commissioned work by Esther Swift a couple of years ago in the Spiegel tent. A harp quartet is a really rare find in jazz, especially combined with strings and jazz band as well, and I just love that MJF gave the space and the opportunity for that work to be performed. 3 words to describe volunteering with the festival: I'd say vibrant, friendly and surprising, but in a good way. And I just love meeting so many amazing people every year. It really fosters a great sense of community, the festival. And it's just brilliant being able to experience all of that amazing music with such great people every year. All the best for 2020.
Thanks for joining us, everyone, once again. Now, I am with a stellar lineup of guitar greats from Manchester here. Stuart, Anton, Mike, and the esteemed John Helliwell. It's, wow. The Wild Axemen of Mancunia are before me to talk about their various works that they produced during MJF Originals in their time. Let's say hello to them, starting with you, Stuart.
Hello, I'm Stuart.
You are
nice
Stuart
to
McCallum?
see everyone. Yeah, Stuart McCallum, guitarist, Manchester.
Yeah. Anton. Sorry, well, we can come back into more detail. Anton.
Oh, hello. Yeah, I'm Anton. Anton's also a guitarist, also yes. Knocking around Manchester.
Yeah. Mike, are you also a guitarist knocking around Manchester?
I'm not knocking around as much as I used to. but around Manchester as much as I used to. But yeah, Mike Walker, guitarist and soup maker.
Nice.
I've got a great soup maker, and I'm just effusing about it at the moment because it's changed my life. Anyway, We'll get into that in a bit, into the important details in a bit.
We'll tap you up for some recipes later, Mike, for that.
You do, yeah.
And John.
Yes, I'm John Helliwell. I'm a saxophone player, and I've got a great soup maker, and that's Christine Helliwell.
Okay. Is she there? Is she kind of waving her wooden spoon at you as she speaks as a threat?
Metaphorically, yes. She's in the background, and I come out and tell her after I've been on the phone or something. She says, yeah, I know, I could hear you.
Oh, thanks for joining us, everyone. It's great to see. We've just been doing a lot of these chats with some of the composers from the MGF Original series over, nearly 20, 25 years. Some amazing work has been produced. And it's no accident that I asked you to kind of join us on the same call, because you each took really different approach to how you play the guitar and also what you did with your work that you produce for MGF Originals. And I just thought it'd be really nice to hear from you, your memories of not just premiere, but the work itself and what you were trying to achieve with that work. And I'll start with Stuart. You created a piece called Chamber Pot for us back in 2007, I think it was. And here I have the brochure from MGF.
Wow.
Your page in. Yeah, Stuart.
Amazing.
There he is. So Stuart, you had a really special guest on your piece, I seem to remember.
Yeah, John Sermon.
Yeah,
it was amazing to get John to do it. I'd met him a few years before on a gig that we both did in Marsden Jazz Festival, and then I met him again at this artist development scheme called Take 5, and he was the mentor teaching us for the week. And I just said, do you want to do a gig? And he said, yeah, all right. So then I spoke to you, Steve, and you said, oh, well, we should do something at the Jazz Festival. And that's how it all came about, really. And what a guy.
Also, you were also really interested in sort of bringing some, because as I remember, the piece, which I haven't listened to, I don't know if you've listened to it since 2007, but it seemed to combine like minimalism, some of your interests in jazz and electronic music as well. It was a really nice amalgamation of what you're into back then.
I think so. I think it was the first time that I'd really written a piece for that number of instruments, and the first time that I'd written a piece before it was played. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Or certainly like a suite of music before it was played by the musicians. So kind of having to turn up to a rehearsal with completed music was certainly a different approach than I'd ever done before, and it was a real challenge to do that. I think some successes. There were some lovely bits and some less successful moments, but that's all part of the process, isn't it? I haven't listened to it for a long time. I listened to it yesterday as I found it on an old computer somewhere, the recording of it. There's some beautiful bits in it. Some beautiful playing by people on it. Obviously John Sermon, absolutely outrageous. Just incredible. What a high, super duper high level guy. And then like Andy Schofield, absolutely smashing it. Kind of really, raising to the level of John Sermon. Who else was on there? Richard Alves was on there, Neil Yates, John Ellis keyboard, Les Chisnell keyboard, Errol Roberts percussion, and a string quartet, and me. Just a young whippersnapper getting completely obliterated by all these ridiculously talented people.
That was really, I think that's been a feature of a lot of the MGF Originals, is that the artists that have been leading have chosen to quite often surround themselves not with just some of their favourite players, but actually people who are going to lift them up as well, either to the next level or to some kind of musical sphere that they haven't previously accessed. And I think that was really clear.
It was. It was one of those moments where you realise the gulf between you and the people that you aspire to be. Which is a beautiful thing, isn't it? It's nice to have that, to play with, to feel that, to play, to be able to interact with that kind of energy and that experience. you know, in real time is different experience to listen to it on record, and I think it really kind of makes you appreciate the level of skill, ability, insight, you know, that they've got. Yeah.
And those players were fairly. Sounds like the players were really key to delivering that for you as well, because you chose.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I guess they were people that I'd watched play since I was young in Manchester, and it was great just to bring them all together. And I guess they'd been such an influence on or they certainly been an influence on shaping my musicality and my outlook. It was nice to bring those people together and have that sound kind of emerge out of it, you know, that kind of sound that I'd aspired to kind of be a part of. And I think there was enough room in the music, you know. It was a lot of the music was tonally fairly quite simple, so it kind of afforded that space for people to just, I don't know, fill their boots, for want of a better expression, but do it kind of collectively, and allowed space for this kind of sense of group agency to emerge kind of quite easily in a way that was quite melodic and textural, as opposed to kind of having so much of the direction of the music taken by the harmony.
That's really important. It's not in any work, but just commissioned work as well. Perhaps in jazz, not to overwrite, isn't it? Not to over compose everything. So you are leaving that space.
I mean, that's something I'm definitely learning how to do now. You know, even just for myself, like how to kind of write and how to create recording environments that best facilitate me. You know, I think when Mike and I did a couple of records, and the second one we went to a studio, and I was kind of trying to be super prepared, and Mike just goes, yeah, you know, I just got to leave space for me to do my thing, you know, and kind of wasn't totally prepared in a way that was really positive. And I think that was a great learning experience for me, of like noticing that little bit of added pressure and forcing that kind of in the moment magic was something that Mike was determined to have, you know. Do you know what I mean? And because I think as improvisers, that's when the magic happens, isn't it? And it's that sometimes that kind of that high level searching skill is where the music kind of comes to life, you know. And that if it's overly prepared, then that kind of starts to diminish that magical qualities sometimes. So it's a balancing act, isn't it? You know?
Definitely, yeah. And you're choosing. Going to come back to you, Mike, after this, but I think Anton, just hearing what Stuart was talking about there, about the choice of player and the kind of that context, I think that was something really key to your piece as well. Completely different sound world, but introduce us to what is still Article 11, the players and the concept behind that, because you also had a process behind the idea that was really fascinating.
Yeah. So like, I mean, as you're saying, that choosing the players is basically like is key in putting any sort of large group together. But what so the process of the idea behind Article 11 was to try and get a little bit more of the voice of those individual players into the writing. So often with large group stuff, especially when there's not much time for rehearsal and stuff, things get written by the composer beforehand. Turn up at the first rehearsal. You know, maybe there's some room for like altering structure and stuff, but generally things are well formed in the mind of the composer. And even if you're open to changing things, generally there's enough rehearsal time to actually like drastically alter anything. So what I wanted to do was to get some input from the musicians. So first of all, I asked like a bunch of my favourite players from kind of like the jazz and improvised music scenes. So people like Sam Andre, Kath Roberts, Mette Rasmussen, my brother, and other people, and then I composed a 2 or 3 bar melody for each of those musicians, and sent that to them just on score, and asked them to record themselves playing it, however they felt, and then immediately into them afterwards. And some of those were kind of a continuation of a melody or a reaction against it, or in some instances it felt like the player and the part weren't actually like well suited, so I changed things around and so on. And then sort of listening to all that, took myself off up somewhere in like the northeast, somewhere on the coast, and listened to it all, transcribed the bits that I liked, and stole it. So stole a nice baritone sax riff from Kath, and nice melodies from like Graham and Nick, and trumpets, and some tracks. So Johnny, my brother, the drummer, replied with like 10 minutes of drum improvisation. So obviously I didn't transcribe that because we couldn't be bothered. But then I would use that as like an audio stimulus, and I like would play along to that, and kind of, I guess, trying to look for ways that you can approach some of that stuff that we do in small groups all the time. If you're meeting up and rehearsing regularly, you kind of bounce off each other, and you naturally develop ideas and pieces, kind of like, oh yeah. But with 11 people, you can't really do that. So I was trying to get some of that feeling into the music, with the hope that then musicians felt some ownership over it, and that their voices were present in the work, as well as, of course, allowing space for that improvisations happen in the moment as well.
And the title kind of captured that spirit as well, didn't it? Fortuitously.
Yeah. So I kind of it takes me a while to come up with titles. I think actually all the pieces were just numbers on the gig, and it like when the album came out 3.5 years later, I eventually had titles for it. But the name Article 11, it stems from the 11th. Hang on, I have to check the CD sleeve again.
Which you have to hand.
Yeah, well, I've got boxes of them if anyone wants any. Article 11 of the European Convention on Human Rights says that everyone has the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and to freedom of association with others, including the right to form and join trade unions for the protection of their interests. And at the time, so Theresa May was the Home Secretary, and noises about how she wanted to like drop the Human Rights Act, and there's a big Amnesty International campaign against that, which in the short term remains to be seen what happens, obviously. But yeah, it felt ridiculous that everyone would be talking about dropping a commitment to maintaining human rights, and then to read that one was about kind of trade unions and Manchester's trade unionist history, and the kind of music we're making is collective. To whatever degree it's written or improvised, there's still a strong like collective identity, and that idea of gathering together to do that. It all resonated for me.
And isn't it great that even as recently as 2014, that kind of music articulating that kind of struggle, as it did with the roots of free jazz, back in the 50s and 60s.
First, and then you chose that for the musician, or is it something you thought the musician might play anyway?
That's a good question. The band was a mixture of people I'd worked really closely with, like my brother, like Sam, like Graham South, Nick Walton, and then some people I hadn't worked closely with but had always wanted to, like Seth Bennett, and at the time we worked a lot since, and also Richard Foote, trombone player. I've worked together a lot since, but it was sort of a mix of like. And the musicians that I played a lot with, I felt like it came quite naturally. And sometimes I'd like, not kind of as anyone's personality, but I'd have some people in mind as I was improvising or like thinking of ideas, or sometimes something would come up and be like, oh.
Did you have a connection between all the bits of music that you gave to them? They were just like picked out of.
Yeah, just
so random.
Yeah, because I didn't want to. Well, looking back, I realised a lot of the way that I write is in short phrases, like often quite loopable phrases. Moving past that, like, yeah, this idea is great. I was going to sit on that for like 20 minutes. It's great. Yeah. Sending those out to people, gave me more inspiration and pointed where next. But yeah, they definitely weren't linked in any kind of meaningful way beforehand.
You just knew that musicians that you picked were going to be the ones which would make that dish in a way, that sort of put them all together, and then make a really like an analogy with making food, perhaps.
Yeah.
You know that if you get the right ingredients. Something's good going to come.
Yeah, well, hopefully. I mean, I guess that's the risk with any kind of big commissions, right?
Yeah.
Any like jazz festival new commissions. Like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You know?
Yeah, good.
I'd say like all the, most of the, I've not been to them all, but most of the MGF original things tend to be a success. I remember both Stu and Mike's coming away feeling like, whoa. And then, years later to go like, oh, I've got one. Bye. That was a good moment. But yeah, you hope that will happen, but it's always a risk, isn't it?
Well, it worked.
Thanks.
Stuart?
Yeah.
Stuart, you were just about to ask a question. What were you going to ask?
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, did it, like, I guess the process of doing that way of working, did that, has that influenced compositional approach since then? So does it, when you're writing by yourself, does the way that they interpreted things and the way that you kind of understood what they'd done in their interpretation, is that giving you kind of stimulus for your own compositional processes, or is that, or not?
What has happened is I've continued to work like that and continued to explore that. So if anything, it's sort of given me a bit more confidence that like a small idea can go a long way, sort of thing, and not kind of have to overthink or over orchestrate or overcomplicate.
It's like just chucking seeds out, isn't it, and seeing what grows and what doesn't.
Yeah.
Have you thought about using like different stimuli, so stuff like, I don't know, just like a sentence or something, as opposed to a musical phrase?
I explored. I went on to do a PhD in this kind of approach, and I use different stimulus in terms of sometimes I would send audio rather than like written, because that started to get a little bit limiting in certain instances.
Yeah.
But I've never been that comfortable like with words or like some people are incredible visual artists as well. I know I enjoy reading Mike's like poetry on the internet as and when it surfaces, but that's not me. Do you know what I mean? So I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that.
Yeah, I'm only asking. I was listening to a podcast the other day where this composer, he has stopped giving any notation scores.
Wow.
And it's all kind of verbal instructions.
Wow.
Or this is really interesting. Yeah. And I was also reading this Brian Eno article about I can't remember who the composer was. It was from like some experimental scene that from his label, which he ran in the 70s, and it was for a cappella like choir, this piece, and it just had a series of instructions about it was completely free, but there was a series of instructions, and it ended up that no matter what happened and what combination of people, a similar pattern would emerge from these instructions. So there was a real sense of compositional structure contained within that real simple idea. I just thought it's kind of interesting, isn't it, that that you've chosen a very specific compositional approach. I'm just wondering how that maybe fed into your process.
Yeah. That would be interesting to check out. Do you remember who it was?
No. It's in a book called No, it's in a book called Audio Culture.
Yeah,
brilliant. Yeah. I'm sure you've got it if you've done a PhD.
I'm looking at it.
Yeah, it's in there. There's two Brian Eno articles. It's not the compositional tool one. It's generative music, I think it's about. It's interesting.
Check it out.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thanks, Anton. I mean, it was also interesting here talking about the relationships as well, that between the players that you chose, and actually that's something you wanted to capitalize upon, but also do. And I think that the relationships, and turning to you, Mike, absolutely key to your piece Ropes. And I'm thinking specifically obviously of Ian, who you wrote the piece for, the soloist, but also the rest of the band that ended up playing on the first performance including people like Les and Adam Nussbaum.
Yeah.
So I mean, kind of bring us into the world of Ropes a bit more, Mike, because that was really a celebration of your kind of musical partnership with Ian, wasn't it? And
yeah, it ended up I mean, initially you asked me to write something. So it was a commission. And I remember that we didn't know because, I mean, you said to me, what do you fancy doing? You know, we can get a little bit of money together, and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And then I said, well, yeah, something with a 22-piece orchestra would be nice, you know. So it was a chance, and we didn't know whether it would come off. Yeah. So there was a kind of thing where we had to put in what I wanted to do, and then wait until to see if we got it or not. So, and they kept us waiting a little bit, and the possible gig was getting closer and closer. So I ended up only having 6 weeks to write that music. I didn't write a note before that, and so so writing for 22 strings, I'd written a little bit for strings before, for Madhouse and the whole thing there. But not to the extent that I did in Ropes. And then I had to think, well, who do I want to do this? And obviously Ian was in there. As you say, he's been a friend and mine for years. So, and he just put so much into it, and smooths things out in a way that makes things a lot easier logistically. Because I can say to him, you know, what if I do this? And he'll say, yeah, that's fine. Write them that. They'll be fine, you know. And I remember saying to him, what if I'm writing something like this for clarinet? Write what you like. It's fine. It'll be, you know, it's a clarinet and it's facile. The facility of it is really, you know, I'll be able to play it, is what his thing was. And then when he saw it,
he changed his mind.
It took him aback a little bit, you know, because I really pushed him, especially in one of the pieces, which is Ropes 3. I really pushed him. It's a hard piece. It's a hard blow for him, that, you know. But I wrote things with people in mind, wrote things with Adam Nussbaum in mind, with Les in mind, you know. The idea of Ropes was shaped by a lot of factors. One was the time limit that I had, you know, writing all that music in such a short space of time. Another was a theme. So it's thematic, so the actual ideas of Ropes go all the way through the music, including the music that isn't a part of the suite. I revisited some older pieces like Madhouse and the whole thing there. I revisited that piece, which is an old piece, and then rewrote the strings in a certain way and tinkered with things so that some of the themes from Ropes would move naturally through. So I wanted it to feel like one whole experience. So it was a complete experiential thing for the audience and for the musicians, you know. But I don't know about the other guys, but it was quite nervy for me. I don't normally get nervous on events, but I don't know what it was like for Stu and Anton, but I was pretty nervous that night. I remember it. And
I think the thing that I've kind of really started to realise on those kind of gigs is that it's the gigs that everyone goes to watch you, right? It's not like a nice little gig where you're just playing to a few people and you're having a great time, just all relaxed, chilled out. You know, it doesn't matter if you make a mistake. But then, you know, you've got that huge build up to it. You've got the rehearsals. You know, it's costing a fortune. You know, it's only going to happen once. And then everyone comes. Your parents come. Your uncles come. You know, just their cousins, long lost cousins from all over the world are there. You know, all your mates, maybe. You know, it's just like, bloody hell. You know, so much pressure. They're all texting, wanting to meet up beforehand, and all this stuff. And you're like, actually, I've spent so long writing all the music, I can't actually play guitar on it. And then everyone's looking at you for direction, and you're like, well, I can't even direct myself, let alone you guys.
Exactly.
Bloody hell.
It was all of that. I remember it. You know, like you know, we had to make a sort of little speech at the end, and I lost the power of speech. I just didn't know what the hell to say, you know.
So that is quite an unusual moment for you, isn't it?
For me, it is.
Yeah.
It's not for you, but it is. But it is. We've started already. So, it was complete. It was completely. It kind of went by in a blur. I managed to enjoy the pieces that because again, I think as Stuart just mentioned, I kind of forgot to write myself in. I wrote all the music for everybody else and forgot to write myself in. So I had to find a way of getting in there that was organic and natural and didn't feel like I was pasting myself in because it was my music, you know. I was kind of happy to watch it go by and be, as well as being the writer and collaborator, just an audience, you know. I was just happy to be an audience of my own music and just enjoy the experience as much as I possibly could. You know, but when we first went on stage, I realized that I couldn't see anything, and then my glasses were in the dressing room, you know, and then Adam Nussbaum said, I'll go and get my, and I thought, Adam Nussbaum's gone for my glasses. This is amazing. You know, it was a lovely experience, a lovely warm experience, but it was at the same time I felt much more nervous than I've done for a long time. I'm kind of over that thing now because I've since done things that were quite big, and for me big anyway. And again, I don't know about Stu and Anton, but that thing of saying I'm presenting who I am, you know, that kind of thing. You know, I'm more relaxed with that now. I don't hold so much store in that now, you know.
I think you're right. And in a way, that's kind of what we inadvertently want to achieve, I think, with all the MGF originals, is to actually encourage people like you to be artists, to be real artists, and actually more than just a musician or a performer or, you know, a composer. And I think part of that journey, which we only realized we were doing, perhaps a way into the series, actually, not just creating a canon of work, but actually lifting people up and giving them an opportunity. But that, as you were saying, Mike, it brings with it quite a daunting prospect of, you know, responsibility and delivery to yourself as much as the audience. And I think everyone's on your side. Everyone wants it to be fantastic, and everyone's there rooting away. So in a way, you can't really go wrong, because no one's your enemy in the crowd. But they're just as you're saying, wanting to see the real you. Okay, this is the opportunity you've been given to create this thing that isn't you just playing someone else's material or someone else's thing. Well, you know.
Exactly.
Sorry to interrupt you.
That thing of everybody like. Yeah, go for it.
Anton,
I've got to
say
off.
goodbye to Anton.
Already kept a student waiting too long.
See you, Anton.
I'll definitely watch it back, so don't anyone say anything bad about me behind my back.
We won't.
Never.
Thanks for joining us, Anton.
Lovely to see you.
See you very soon.
Cheers.
See you, Anton. Bye.
God, thank goodness he's gone.
Oh God, he was so awful. He was so dull. I'm so ashamed of myself for asking Anton in there. Anton, don't worry, we love you, man. We love you. But
I'm going to try and stick around so that I'm the last person to go to and try and badmouth me, you know.
What an interesting approach he had there, wasn't it? I think that's a brilliant approach. Very inclusive.
It was great. And what we didn't mention, actually, because it took place in Central Library in Manchester just after it had reopened. Do you remember it had that big refurbishment a couple of years ago? And they created a new performance space in there. And it's a kind of blank canvas, really. But because they just opened and being a library, that openness and that place of coming together and learning and being in Manchester just outside, you know, where all kinds of movements have started, that felt really pertinent for his work to take place in the library as well. And it was great. And it was difficult music a lot of the time. And of course, we had sponsors back then. And I was thinking, oh God, what are they going to, you know, John, yes, when we had Owen Mitchell sponsoring quite a few of these along the years, and
Yes.
we gave them this one, which, I mean, I was really excited because it was so risky, but a little bit nervous that we might, lose the sponsorship because.
Yes.
But they stayed all the way through, because we didn't say to them, "This is going to be really hard. You won't like it." We just presented it as another commissioned work.
You can imagine the accountants are stayed in themselves, aren't you? But they seem to be quite open to it all.
Yeah.
They need a bit of madness in their lives, don't they?
They do, yeah.
Yeah.
But just going back to what you're talking about, Mike, that the sort of combined pressure of opportunity and but that adrenaline that comes with it, and I suppose it opens up a new world, doesn't it? That you perhaps weren't thinking of before, because then once you get past that, you've passed that little threshold, and as you were saying, well, I've done that now, so actually this might be possible next. I can take this
exactly on. I mean, I probably wouldn't have presented the opportunity. I probably wouldn't have gone there. It's not. It's because it's not. It's not inexpensive getting all of those musicians together. Adam on his own can break the bank. So it was quite an expensive risk. I mean, it came off in the end, and it was a beautiful success, and it was just a lovely evening, really. I remember it as being a very warm, familial kind of evening, and like Stuart saying, your local doctor is there, your shopkeeper, they're all there, and it's that thing of as you were saying, that there's two sides to that coin of the fact that you can't lose. There's something else. There's another kind of pressure.
There's a real sense of expectation in there, isn't there? Everyone's rooting for you, but they're wanting to, they want to go away with a feeling of that they've witnessed something unique and something special. Do you know what I mean? And I think that undercurrent of additional pressure that potentially maybe it's just us putting it on ourselves, but I do get a sense of that. But I don't know. There's so many factors involved in there, and I think for me, I've realized is that I think looking back to that gig is there's so many stages in the process to get to the point and feel like you're ready in all, not just ready having just got the music printed off that morning, kind of ready. Do you know what I mean? I think I would approach it quite differently now, but that gives you, isn't it? And I think what I have realized is that I need people around me to help facilitate it, and that doing it all yourself is not the answer. But it's taken time to realize that, because we're sold that thing, that kind of, we talked about it the other day, but this triangular hierarchy of like composer, one composer at the top, orchestra, composer, conductor, orchestra, audience gets bigger each time. And since the Romantic period, that was the way things were. Do you know what I mean? Since they could sell sheet music, basically, and there's the sense that this kind of notion of genius and all that kind of crap that we're kind of sold and have been sold, within the record industry infrastructure, that it's definitely had an impact on the way I thought I should approach doing it, having never been taught how to do it.
And do you think sorry, Stuart, that pressure that you're talking about, what all of you are talking about, is that also comes about because you are the composer, you're also the performer, and you're the guitar player in the band. You're occupying a lot of roles where
that's it. You're the MD, you're the composer, you're the orchestrator, you're the what's the part writer called? What are they called?
The copyist.
That's the one. You're the copyist. You're the manager. You're the potentially. Do you know what I mean? There's so many things, and I've done JF gigs. The last one I did was at the RNCM. It was quite, a big thing. But I did a day sheet for everyone. There was a lot of people coming on there, so I did like production, pre-production. Do you know what I mean? But it's just kind of all of those things that you think, well, actually, that means that I can get on that stage and just be a little bit more relaxed, because I don't have 20 people going, is there a buyout? Where are we meeting? What time's sound check? You know, that 500 texts situation. So yeah, and that's let alone even just trying to get the music together and kind of getting it, you know, like, because I think, like, looking back at my commission, you know, I had strings, I had 2 flugelhorns, you know, saxophones, clarinet, organ, piano, and percussion, like tuned percussion and hand percussion, and guitar. So like that, you know, if I'd sent to an orchestrator, this is what I've got, they would go, oh, look, think of the tone colors and we can blend this, that, there, you know, and actually I would need to work with someone to help get the most out of that combination of instruments, because that's not my skill set, you know, and just like actually knowing that and knowing that that's all right to do that, and the music will be better as a result of it, you know. Do you know what I mean? Just those kind of simple things that you don't have to do it all yourself, that I would do differently now. And I think having the support of the Jazz Festival around the kind of logistical side of it was really fantastic, you know, and having the venue sorted and the promotion sorted and somebody liaising with the musicians. But I think, kind of just more, for me anyway, you know, working with other people in the creation of the music would have been beneficial, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, these conversations have really opened up the process, and people can understand that they might be coming to one of these performances. It takes an hour of their life to experience it, but you will put days, weeks, months of thought process and preparation, and you know, and the amount of work that goes into someone coming along to a performance and being able to receive and experience that just for an hour. It's crazy proportion, but I guess that's what, you know, great art is about. You know, you kind of consume it at the point in a different time space than in which it was created. But it's interesting. But,
it's and the point is that it's not the audience's concern as to how much time and effort has gone into a performance. It could be years of someone's work, or it could be 5 minutes of someone's work. You know, but that's not important. And it could be that you've travelled for 3 days to get there, or you've just come round the corner 5 minutes.
They're not bothered, are they?
No. They're not. No, it shouldn't bother them at all.
No. Why should it?
That's why it's interesting.
There's an interesting. Sorry,
someone's moaning. Someone on stage is moaning. Oh, I've had such a bad day, or something. It's not for the audience. You just go out and say, "Hey," and play.
It's kind of analogous to what Stuart was saying before about when we were in the studio. Me and Stu was in the studio at Real World, and there's, because we can play the numbers, and we can play the numbers really well together, play by the numbers really well together, I mean, or we can look for something that's outside of that periphery, where there's more risk and there's more and things happen that wouldn't have happened had we not been there together. So individually, they just would not have happened. And I'm not talking just sonically there. I'm talking about the way the ideas wrap around each other, both horizontally and vertically. So a great example of that was Alfie, because when we did Alfie, we probably, I can't remember how many takes we did, Stu. 3 takes. Was it 3?
3, yeah, 2 or 3, I think.
It was 3 takes, and I kind of weaved stuff around Stuart's thing, and that's the way it was. So he had to trust me. So we have this kind of trust bond that's going on, because initially Stu had got this lovely sort of thing together, and then what the actual idea was is what happened was that I painted around this picture that he'd already painted, and it was this clash of coming together and the sinews coming together. It had a lovely thing. It didn't always work live, but most of the time it did, I found. It actually worked more times live than I really thought it would, where people would come up and say, oh, that arrangement of such and such a thing was lovely. And I'd say, well, actually, we just kind of did that, you know, that's what it happened tonight, you know. Yeah. So it's analogous to that kind of where you're giving yourself to the elements, and letting the chips fall where they fall. And in the studio, that's quite a thing, especially when it's in a place like Real World and people are there who have got an investment in there, etc., and they're listening, and we're just doing our thing. But there are some beautiful things that came out of that for that album. And Alfie was a particular one for me that came out that was quite a special moment, I think, in terms of the way those two things come together and make one thing as an individual whole. It was.
Yeah, I think that for me, I think something I observed is the way that we play is that I think my approach has definitely been leaving space, you know, generally in my music, and I guess almost like trying to strip away the kind of jazz history of my playing, just to kind of get to the core of who I am, that without that kind of more complex harmonic approach. And now actually I'm kind of bringing a bit of the harmony back in again, but I think your approach it's spacious, but in a kind of more adventurous way, and a kind of like denser voicings, very considered and very, you know, very thought through in its approach, but kind of the denser, so the kind of, you have my spacious thing and then your denser bits just kind of fit in and weave around that. And I think that for me, that's the kind of reason that we can play together as guitarists, and it's not a massive shred fest.
Oh God, yeah. No, it's music first.
Yeah. I also, what strikes me is what you're both talking about is using the familiar to help you get to the unfamiliar, perhaps. And you kind of, and that's, I guess, what you're doing when you're writing a commission, any new piece, where you're combining those two forces, aren't you? And it's like, can I use a little bit of stability of what I know to get me to this that is the new work, the new music, the new experience? And that I found that through all these conversations we've been having, actually, I think you probably agree, John, they've all been various ratios of the familiar and the unfamiliar that people have used to create something new.
Yeah, to push themselves. And it's good.
Yeah. But that in essence is what creativity is, isn't it? And I think that can work in a way that's psychologically new for you. Or, you know, or capital C creativity is where it's historically creative for the entire world and for humanity, you know, and that's obviously the second one is a lot rarer, but I think that kind of, certainly that sense of psychologically creative for the individual is something where you know, it's that kind of advancement of your own individual knowledge and ability, isn't it?
Right.
Which I guess, you know, having to work in a new environment and potentially writing for different forces or different, you know, just writing for something different forces that advancement, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think we've certainly forced a lot of artists to do things over the years. Hopefully they've been proud of their results. But just to sum up, really, it's been great to hear all three of you, and especially talking to you two, Stuart and Mike, about some of your work as duo as well, playing as well. It's been really interesting. I think that's played an important part in the musical development. But
I was just thinking about this, actually. I've got
Go on, Stuart.
This is the one guitar that we always talked about collaborating with, but actually
wow.
Yeah, do you remember that, Mike?
I do.
Yeah. Casio G20.
You've done it.
Yeah.
Well done. On second thoughts.
Album 3.
Yeah.
On second thoughts, mate.
Have you got to go, Mike?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
That's it, The engine's running. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, no. Thanks so much, guys. It's been great chatting to you. And it's great to delve back into time as well. And thanks for remembering those pieces, back to 2007, 2008. And thanks to Anton as well. It's been great to include you in these discussions and the memories of MJF over the 25 years as well. And
Hey, keep making that jazz, guys.
Keeping the jazz, keep the jazz alive.
Keep it going.
Thanks for your time, Steve.
Thanks, guys. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah. See you, boys.
See you later.
Bye. Bye.
Hi, I'm Babs. I've been a volunteer since 2010. I work as front of house for the Manchester Jazz Festival, which means that I'm the first person people see when they come in to the festival. My most memorable experience was when I was asked to work at the Midland Hotel for the popular afternoon teas. And I was really surprised when John Helliwell from Supertramp walked in, and it was great to catch up with him. So hope to see you in 2021. Bye!
So MJF Originals 25 at 25 with Mike Walker, Stuart McCallum and Anton Hunter. Manchester is obviously a breeding ground for great guitarists, isn't it? And back in 2008, I think it was, Steve, you said that you commissioned Mike Walker to do his piece Ropes, which is for an orchestra and his jazz quintet. And this is what we're going to see now is live concert footage of a later performance in 2014 with the contemporary music ensemble Safa and his quintet, which features Gwilym Simcock on piano, Adam Nussbaum on drums, Steve Rodby on bass, who's played with Pat Metheny, and Ian Dixon on clarinet. He plays an important part. So, concert of Mike Walker's Ropes, starting now.
Mike Walker's suite for Ian Dixon on clarinet and the jazz ensemble, along with the Safa Contemporary Music Ensemble in Manchester. And we heard Adam Nussbaum on the drums, Steve Rodby on the bass, Gulam Simcock at the piano, and Ian Dixon on clarinets, and of course Mike Walker on guitar. And our thanks to Safa for allowing us to broadcast that recording, which they made just a couple of years ago. And that piece was commissioned, as we were talking about earlier, in 2007 as part of our MGF Originals commissioning series. Now, we are from a live debate, which is going to be focused on the future of music under lockdown. So we need to close down this stream, and we need to take you with us to the next festival venue, which will be starting in a new Facebook stream, which should appear above this one, at the top of the Facebook page when you close this one down. So if you could close this stream, and to join the Future of Music in Lockdown debate, which should start about 9 o'clock, please click on the new stream link that should appear above on Facebook. So we'll see you there in about 10 minutes' time. Thanks very much.